Welcome back. We're here with Steve from Earnscape. Steve, thank you so much for coming on, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's been better than the much stressful week that I had. It's getting better as the week comes to an end, so glad to be here.
Yes, love to hear, man. Very excited to dive into what you're building. So thank you for coming on.
Well, pleasure to be here. Thanks for hosting.
Yes. And so can you talk to us about how Earnscape enhances the gaming experience for users?
Yeah, it does it in a couple of ways. One, it's nice to get paid to play games.
Yeah.
So, as the most simple way that we can put it, that's the simplest, most direct way that your gameplay is enhanced. It doesn't matter what game you're playing, you're going to get paid at least a little bit for it. And that generally is because as you play games using our platform to start them, our platform runs in the background and in the foreground. It collects a bunch of data on you, so we're pretty upfront about that. We're not hiding that. We are collecting your data, but we're paying you for it. So that's the basis of the rewards that you get. Also, we then use that data not to serve you ads like Facebook,
Yeah.
YouTube, everybody else under the sun. We just use that information to kind of nudge you to play different games. So you can play literally any game, at least mobile game that you can download onto your device using Earnscape, assuming you got it legitimately and didn't sideload it or it's not a PWA or something like that. But after you've played for a little bit, actually, we start recommending right away. But after you've played for a little bit, our system learns more about you and starts recommending that you play some of the games that we've partnered with. So it's a game discovery platform on top of something that just allows you to make some money from your time.
So you would say that your platform is not only giving gaming studios a place to promote their game, but it's also allowing their users to seamlessly, like monetize and then earn money on top of that.
Definitely, yeah. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
Game discovery is pretty broken. About 200 new games come out every day. There's a quarter
Wow.
million of them currently available that you can go download, and that number's probably out of date because I got that number a couple weeks ago. So now
Yeah.
there's a few more thousand since 200 come out every day. And if you're not a massively funded super studio that's got millions of dollars, you probably aren't going to be able to compete with people like who are the big ones, like Raid Shadow Legends dumps a crap load of money
Yes.
into marketing. Royal Match dumps a crap load of money into marketing. All the was it Ebony the King's Return dumps a crap load of money into marketing. So they buy all of the available ad space, which makes it almost impossible for a relatively smaller game produced by a smaller studio to get some mind share. We put your game in front of all of these players that are using our platform and put it right alongside those big super giants that are paying massive amounts of money because they're the games that are already downloaded. So people are downloading those games and playing them anyway. Might as well make a little bit of money by playing it through our
Yeah.
platform. Well, now your game is sitting right there at the top, matched to the users who are playing games that are similar to yours.
And you really hit on a point that I think is really important is the fact that you guys do collect data, you're transparent about it, but you use it in a positive manner. Where did this perspective come from to not take your users' data and just sell it to advertisers?
I hate scams. Uh, and I view that as one of the most pure forms of scam because oftentimes they don't even tell you what they're doing.
Yes.
We all know that they're collecting our data, but they don't really tell you what they're doing with it. They tell you that they're just using it to target ads to you, but we know that's not true. Because if that was true, how come when I just go and say, oh, gee, I'm interested in a trip to Alaska? And I've never spoken about Alaska before. Then suddenly, all
Yeah.
these other places start giving me advertisements for trips to Alaska. Sure, maybe you're doing that, you're collecting the data and selling it in order to generate more ads, but you're not the one serving me the ads.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting them everywhere now. So we don't do that at all. And in my opinion, and I've actually been kind of a data monger for quite some time. My previous startup before this was a company that used data collection to help identify public policies that should be changed and make recommendations to legislators and lawmakers and policy organizations and whatnot to try and help them make better decisions as to what laws should be getting passed. So I've always been an advocate for ethical use of data and kind of runs way back to realizing in the early 2010s how poorly and corrupt data was actually being used.
Yeah.
That has really touched a nerve for me in a lot of ways, and I am greatly opposed to it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think there's even these third party platforms like you see a lot in the discount platform space. I found a lot of users don't even realize that their data is being taken. Like, yes, you know it's being taken on Facebook or Instagram, but then when you go to other platforms like the discount space, they don't even know that their data is being taken. And yeah, they put in the terms and conditions, but we both know that's not being read.
Yeah, we wish you would read the terms and conditions. I'm like the kind of guy who actually reads that stuff, but I acknowledge that a lot of people do not. Most, I would say, 98% of people do not.
Yeah,
Probably more because a lot of people simply don't have the grasp of the language to do it. We're a global market. We're a global company. All of these people are global. The terms are only ever in English. I've never seen anybody offer translations into like French or German or Chinese or Bengali or anything other than English.
yeah,
So if you don't have a really solid, possibly native level requirement of English understanding, you're not going to be able to understand what you're reading anyway. So yeah, like we know that it's happening, but unless you actually have the technical and linguistic skills required to understand what's in these terms, you don't really know how it's being used.
yeah. And why is it important that games add monetization for its users through Earnscape versus just doing it themselves?
I mean, you're more than welcome to try it in yourself, but what we've seen is that everybody screws this up. And if you look at the Web3 space specifically, everybody who's trying to add Web3 style monetization to their games, they have a habit of attracting airdrop farmers and
Yes.
uh, similar. I don't want to get derogatory, but let's just say value extractors
Yeah.
who are only there to try and get as much out of the ecosystem as they can. And no game can survive without people actually paying into it. In traditional gaming, that comes from the form of just buying a disc, and we still see that in PC gaming where people go and pay like $60 for a digital download. Nobody goes to GameStop and buys a disc anymore unless you're really old school or you're playing on a console. But for mobile, there is no physical device to purchase. There's no medium, so it's all digital downloads, and nobody wants to pay for anything up front. There are some, I think it's like 12% of games are paid downloads, but almost all of them are free to play. The other 88%. So those games have to monetize somehow. A lot of them monetize directly through advertising, and then the others do in-app purchases. And they use a hybrid freemium model. Depends on whatever their approach is. But when they try to retain users, all those ads, they just drive you away.
Yeah.
Like the games I mentioned before, the ones that spend a crap load on marketing, they then bombard you with ads like every 5 minutes. Not even like sometimes I feel like some of the games that I've played, like every minute I'm watching an ad, and then sometimes I'll have to watch like five in a row in
Yeah.
order to get the thing that I'm trying to get, unless I give them money. And I'm not the kind of guy who's going to give them money because we can get into that. I'm sure that's going to come up later why I won't do that, but I would through Earnscape. So the reasons that you should use Earnscape are because it removes a lot of those friction points for trying to identify the users. Since we do the user acquisition for you, and the cost comes way down. Usually it costs like somewhere on the order of $2 to $5 to acquire a user for a mobile game. That doesn't even guarantee they're going to stay. The 30-day retention rates for mobile games are around 2%.
Wow.
So, and 25% just will or you'll only have about 25% generally after a whole day. So you're spending like $5 to get a person who plays your game once and then uninstalls it. On net, eventually, if you churn the numbers enough, you'll find enough people who will stay and will make yourself some money. But it's really cost inefficient, and there isn't really an effective way right now in the market for people who don't have the massive budgets to be able to solve this problem. Well, monetize and just throwing money at the problem is one way everybody tries to do it, and rewards are the current way that everybody's trying to do it. If you don't have the marketing for, you don't have the millions in order to break into the traditional ad markets, we remove a lot of that friction because it costs very little to acquire a user through Earnscape. Our cost to acquire a user is quite low because we've got this figured out. and then we can sort those users to who the games need, and we can sort the games to the users. So that drastically brings down the cost of user acquisition, and that makes the model relatively affordable, actually a far more affordable than the current models that most game studios are using. So that's why you should use us if you're a game
Yeah.
studio, because your existing models probably aren't going to work very well, and we have native integrations with every game on the store, so it doesn't take any time for you to get set up. Literally less than a minute, and a game can claim their title and start getting preferred traffic if they want. And the costs are quite low. Like, I was actually running some numbers earlier today, and the most expensive game, we're actually not charging anything right now because we're still doing a whole bunch of testing, and we just deployed some new stuff, and we're getting ready for another major deployment. Then we'll start charging. If we were charging, the game studio that we have been sending the most traffic to would have paid us about $1,200.
Wow.
And that number, I have also worked with them closely, so I know what their numbers looked like before they used us and what they are now. We have 5x'd their DAU count,
Wow.
and we've doubled their player count. So they did that for just $1,000 a month through Earnscape, whereas those results would cost $50,000 a month if you were trying to do this through a traditional means.
Yeah. And why do you think that traditional means of running ads for your mobile game is so broken? Like why does it not work?
Simply put, there's just too much money at stake. There's too much competition, and there's too much money. The big super firms have millions that they can throw into buying up all the ad space. They can dominate the market. Saturate the airwaves isn't really a relevant term anymore because we're not doing over the air broadcasting, but you still get the idea.
Yeah.
They just basically buy up everything, and that drives up the price. There's only so much advertising space out there. There's only so many gamers. We're increasing the number of games faster than we're increasing the number of
Yeah.
gamers. We're not seeing 200 new gamers come online every day. Maybe we are, but I highly doubt it. And those people aren't going to find every individual game. They're going to find the ones that have the most money. They're going to find the ones that are getting featured on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. They're going to find the ones that have $10 million a month to shovel into saturating your ad space. So those people buy up the market basically, and that shuts everybody else out. This is a really common phenomenon. We see this all the time in every market. The Hunt brothers, way back like 100 years ago, tried to do a short squeeze on silver. They bought up all the silver, and that raised the price. Anybody that wanted silver had to pay ridiculous prices that we still haven't seen to this day. We see this with labor. We see this with cars. Like, Cash for Clunkers took all the small cars off the market, and now you basically have to buy a new car. Some of that damage is finally starting to get mitigated now that we're 10 years plus removed from Cash for Clunkers. At least I'm in the US, so this is relevant to me. And I'm always complaining about the big tech companies hoovering up all the best engineering talent and then paying them like $300,000 a year to change the color of a button on one page of their 1,000-page website. Like, how can you possibly justify that? You're just
Yeah.
hoovering up everything, and that drives up the price for everybody else, so nobody else can break in. I personally, I think it's a conspiracy to prevent anyone
Yeah.
from breaking into the market, and the same could be said for gaming. It's not necessarily a conspiracy, but they are basically suppressing anybody else from being able to break in and take out their entrenched interests by hoovering up all the ad space, spending gobs of money on it so that nobody else can break in. So there's an alternative that's needed, and we provide that.
And you mentioned that you guys have some new features launching. Could you kind of talk about those?
Yeah, so in constant Google problems, we have been fighting with them for weeks now to get them to approve our major release updates, and we just finally got that done yesterday. So the way is paved and clear now, so we can start quickly releasing all this other stuff that we've got. Previously, basically, the only thing you've been able to do in our platform is play games, which, that's our core value proposition, that's our core thesis, so that's what we expect you to do. But now we have a lot more stuff that we have been building for months that we can finally start to release. This includes our ambassador program. So our ambassador program is, I previously was calling it viral user marketing. So basically what we're doing is we're allowing the games to employ our users to be their shillers and their marketers
Wow.
and their brand advocates. So if you're someone who really likes the games that you're playing, let's say you really like Wag Me Defense. They're one of our partner games. It's a really good game, and you want to go make a little bit of extra money shilling them. Now you can, because we'll give you assignments that will give you directly some of the points that, our rewards are offered in points, and then you
Hmm.
redeem the points for stable assets, like specifically US dollars. That's the big thing right now. Everybody wants dollars. Who
Yeah.
doesn't?
Yes.
So we'll just basically give you points that are redeemable for dollars, and soon also our experience points. And yeah, you can earn those by shilling the games that you really like. Just go compose a tweet, promote their content, create some videos, post about them on YouTube or TikTok, wherever you happen to have a social media presence. And that will both help you make a little bit more money. It'll also help the games that you enjoy, because now they'll get a little bit more organic reach. We also have live streaming. Live streaming is, we figured out pretty quickly that mobile live streaming is kind of broken, because if you want to be a mobile live streamer, there's really no effective way. You can use like Streamlabs, but it doesn't work very well, at least not for this kind of streaming, screen share streaming. If you want to just be someone who walks around with your phone and be like, yeah, hey, look what I'm doing. Yeah, there's plenty of options for that.
Yeah.
You can use TikTok for that if you want. But if you want to stream your gameplay like the big time streamers do, you really, on a mobile game, have to go through a bunch of hoops, because you got to download an emulator, then you got to download the game from the emulator, then you got to have a system like OBS that you can boot it up and then multi-stream to all these other platforms. It's kind of a hassle, especially if you don't really know how emulators work. So nobody really does it. And there's a lot of games that have been wanting that. And personally, I discover a ton of games through live streaming. Almost all
Yeah.
the games I'm playing right now or have interest in, I discovered through following my favorite streamers. And that's a really strong use case for
Yes.
implementing streaming for someone who's trying to break into the market, to go bypass all of the fact that you can't just saturate the market with ad dollars anymore. So you have to find these other ways, and adding live streaming is a natural complement to this. So we've got live streaming integrated into our system. It uses the same protocols that all the major stream systems do. So you stream directly to other Earnscape users. You can stream to your YouTube platform. You can stream to, well, we haven't gotten Twitch integrated yet. They need a special key from us, and they won't give it to us until we've reached a certain benchmark, but that's coming. We have a partnership with them sort of pending that will allow us to get that. But yeah, we've got integrations with all the major platforms right now. So if you connect your account, you'll be able to stream to those platforms,
Amazing.
or you can just stream directly to other Earnscape users. And we also have a partnership with an organization that has connections to a bunch of telecommunications companies in Southeast Asia. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like they have 250 million subscribers, and they're
Wow.
looking for ways to create more activity on their networks. Live streaming is a great way to
Yes.
generate data consumption on your networks. So we have a APK, or an SDK, sorry, that we're building for them, that they're going to integrate into their systems, and they're going to push all of their subscribers to start watching live streams that are being pushed out through Earnscape. So
Amazing.
you're going to have
Yeah.
a really
Yeah.
large built-in audience for your streams, which is really going to help the games that we're partnering with generate a lot more activity.
It's fascinating because you don't look at the mobile live stream space as like a huge industry, but then when you really,
It's
you like
because it's
dive
not
into
really
it.
there.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
industry that's waiting for a solution so that it can be created. We know game streaming is a huge market. And like, if you look, God, why am I always, I want to call them Ascension. I can't remember the name of the protocol right off the top of my head, but they're a new streaming protocol that really focuses on desktop and laptop, like everybody. And like, they reported it in 24 hours. They had like $8 million in tips flow through it.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's a huge industry,
Yeah.
and nobody's really cracked it for mobile. I don't understand why nobody has really done this yet. So I hope that nobody who's a budding competitor listens to this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And you've been in the tech space, like you mentioned before, especially in the data space. As humans, do you think there should or will ever become a point when we stop innovating and we just start to enjoy the things that we have created?
We'll stop innovating when we become extinct. So there you go. Because The mother of invention is necessity. So as long as humans are around, we'll still need something, and at that point, someone will have to innovate to create something new. But I think that we probably should slow down a little bit and try to enjoy the fruits of the labor that has come before us, rather than relentlessly charge towards nonstop innovation at breakneck speed. Yeah, if we don't properly integrate the solutions that we've created before we create the next ones, we run the risk of running too fast and tripping over our own feet.
Yeah.
The pace of human development has, I'm sure everybody's seen the graph, it just goes like, but yeah, for the longest time, we innovated, but it was relatively slow. But now compounding results are starting to generate faster and faster and faster innovations. Like, a person born 100 years ago didn't even probably, well, no, a little over 100 years ago, there was no electricity basically, and there was no flight. Someone born 150, my great grandparents were born like before electricity was commonplace in homes, and when they ended their lives, people had set foot on the moon. Like, that's a tremendous, well, assuming you believe that, that's a tremendous rate of development. And if you go back further than that, 200 years ago, between 200 years and 300 years ago, the rate of development was so much slower. And going back to like thousands of years ago, if we go far enough back to like the Roman Empire, they were starting to have that same effect until they collapsed. So maybe we could argue they were running too fast and started tripping over their own feet and didn't figure out how to properly employ the things that they had innovated. I remember reading that they had actually started to develop electricity in the Roman Empire before it
Wow.
collapsed, and we can tell this because there are artworks that were electroplated. They were using electroplating gold, so they had electricity, but it fell it fell apart. They knew about electrical currents. I'm getting way off topic here, but yeah, I think that at some point we do need to slow down a little bit and kind of fully absorb the ramifications of major technological advancements before we start really trying to plow ahead into other ones. And honestly, I think at the same time we do need to go faster. So trying not to contradict myself here, because there's really two different development paths in that have been, I'd say, at the forefront of human mind share for the past half a decade or half a century. And that's the world of bits versus the world of atoms. Almost all of our development has come in the world of bits. Very little has come in the world of atoms. We have not much new energy development. We have not much new battery technology. We have very little new like ways of communicating. The Unless you count the internet. But once we had the internet as something that basically was in everybody's hands, we really stopped innovating in the world of physical reality. There's only a couple of people who are really doing it, and they're the people that are trying to get us into space. And everybody else seems to just be kind of tinkering around with what we've already got. We haven't seen any really breakthrough innovations. I would love to see a lot more of the mental energy of humanity that's going into developing the latest and greatest app. I'm kind of telling on myself here, going into developing the latest and greatest communications technology. In another life, I have these ideas for how we can develop a really secure peer-to-peer electronic communication system that does not use the internet, that uses quantum computing to, and we actually have the technology to do this, but nobody's implemented it. You would have to physically meet a person and exchange a card with them, and then that would load into your phone, and then you'd have a direct line of communication with that person directly from phone to phone that wouldn't go through a cell tower, wouldn't go through the internet, wouldn't go through anything else. You just directly communicate with them. That would be so secure. That would be the best form of communication, and it would work across light years because of how quantum entanglement works. So like all of this technology is there, but nobody's developing it because we've all been forced into developing things in the internet.
Yeah, and I think we could have an entire conversation and a 1 hour podcast just off the Roman Empire
Oh,
and
we absolutely.
and
How
Nikola
long can you speak about
Tesla.
the Roman Empire?
And I always like to look at Nikola Tesla and what he, his kind of involvement when it comes to inventions,
Right.
and how he kind of went after like the ether. So not even like, like tech heavy, but he went after like a whole different subject. I think we could have an entire podcast just off that.
Probably.
Um, but I have Two more questions for you. So I saw on your LinkedIn that your bio says share what you know, always help others where you can, and pitch into building novel solutions whenever the opportunity arises. Did you always have this abundant growth type mindset, or was it kind of something that you learned throughout your life?
Well, considering I haven't updated my LinkedIn bio in about 15 years, I'd say that that's been there for a while. Yeah, that's always been kind of at the forefront of my mind. I've one of my ethos of life has always been to seek the truth of reality, regardless of how much it may hurt you. And a lot of the times that means pitching in and helping out whenever opportunities arise because you never know where that's going to go. You never know what you might learn. You never know what things that you never could have fathomed you will discover. Like I've helped out. If you checked out my LinkedIn, you should know that I helped get the Free Republic of Liberland set up, which is a brand new country. It's about 10 years old. It will be 10 years old in 2 months from this recording. It's a new country, sits on the Danube River between Serbia and Croatia. Not many new countries get formed. And so when they asked me to help them out with some things, I wasn't really sure how I possibly could, but I agreed. If they came up with something that they could use my expertise on, I'd be happy to help. And after several months, a few things did start to come up. And
Wow.
I never asked for anything. They made me a citizen as a result, and I got some of their government like recognition stuff. But I've never been paid. Like I've never received like a paycheck for it. The last time I did something for them, they reimbursed my expenses. That was a first. Usually, I've had to cover my own way anytime I help anybody out at all. But that's just always been my opinion is that if you want to grow as a human and as a soul, you need to accept every opportunity that is given to you to help make the world a better place.
Yeah, that is a beautiful mindset. And I love your perspective because I think when you give and you give and you give and you give, yes, you might lose short term, like in your opportunity. You could have very well looked at that as a loss. Like, oh, I'm paying all this money, I'm doing all this stuff, but what experiences like like might have you not learned like if you didn't do that? What connections could you have made? Like there's so many opportunities that might even make you more money in the long term by just sacrificing and giving for free and trying to help people.
Yeah, this has come back to bite me in the ass a lot, but I never really consider what I'm going to get paid for something when I go to do it. I do consider whether I have the capacity to do it, whether I am physically and mentally able to do it, and if I have too much on my plate. If both of those say I shouldn't do it, then I'll turn it down. But if I do have the capacity and I do have the ability, I'll almost always say yes, regardless of what the compensation is. As a result, I am far poorer than I probably would be if I had made a pointed effort to demand compensation for everything that I do. But I've also become far wealthier in experience, and I have learned a lot more, and I know a lot more people than I would have ever met had I always demanded to be like, yeah, I never would have gone to the inauguration in DC like for Trump and gotten into these like $10,000 dinners. Like I that was really cool. But that was just something that came about because I had been helping these guys out for free more or less for what year is it now? 2025 for like 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, you gotta think in the long term. If you're always
Yes.
looking at short term payoffs, nothing's ever gonna work. And entrepreneurship is like the pinnacle of that whole ideology and mindset. If you're looking for something to just get rich quick, entrepreneurship and starting a company is not for you. You've got to be kind of insane to do it because it demands so much of you time, energy, money. Uh, I can not possibly count the number of days and nights that I have not spent with my wife and kids because I've been building a company and listening to all these people complain that something's not working and stressing out over it and getting it fixed and getting no thank yous for getting it fixed. But that just kind of goes with the territory. If you're not willing to accept that and know that you just have to put in your dues basically to
Yeah,
build something, you're not going to be able to do it. It requires a real long-term mindset.
absolutely. I agree. I agree completely. Steve, I have one more question for you. If you could have dinner with two people, one person from the past and one person from the present, who would it be and why?
Oh God.
I feel like you're going to have a fire answer for this.
I don't. I'm gonna chintz out and go with the person for the present. I'd have dinner with Elon Musk. I do have a tangential relationship to the guy, so I know that we would have a fair amount to talk about because I play this obscure sport called underwater hockey, and his cousin Lyndon Rive is someone who also plays underwater hockey. He was the founder and CEO of Solar City, which Tesla acquired, and that's why Tesla has all this solar technology. So I know that, and I've actually met the guy a couple times at Burning Man. I'm sure he does not remember me. It was very briefly and in passing on his rocket ship art car. But I think that I would love to pick his brain and kind of get a better idea of how he thinks. You can't really figure these things out from like a Joe Rogan interview or from reading a book. You know, you have to actually be physically in the same room as people and have directed pointed questions. I have a lot of questions about like why he wants to go to Mars. I know the reasons that he always gives to secure a foothold for consciousness in the world, in the universe, because we have no idea whether we are unique or not. I personally believe we are not. I believe that consciousness is not that uncommon throughout the universe, but that we just haven't found it for reasons I won't dive into in this conversation. But I would love to hear more about his thinking on that, because if I reach this conclusion, I would love to know why he has reached a different conclusion on it and why he
Yeah.
thinks that there is an existential risk to the light of consciousness being snuffed out if something happens to humans on Earth. So there's one thing. As for someone in the past, oh my God, there's so many people. Uh, God, I really, I don't know.
Come on, I know you have a fire, unique person in your mind somewhere.
I've got like 20 that I'm bouncing around right now trying to pick one. And if I can only pick one, does it have to be a confirmed person that we know existed?
As long as he's not like a fiction, like a cartoon character. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I okay, we'll go all the way back then. I'd love to, because we don't. I've and I don't want to alienate people because how I prefaced that. But there is very little archaeological evidence that this person actually existed, but there's tons of records that indicate that he did. There's only one written report by a Roman named Tacitus that he actually was a real human being who physically described him. But I'd love to have dinner with Jesus if we're talking with someone in the past. I would love to expand on everything that has been said and translated over the millennia and go directly to the horse's mouth, so to speak, and
Yes.
figure out exactly what all of this stuff means. Like, you are supposedly the Son of God. If you truly are the Son of God, I have so many questions for you. And those questions have been asked many times, but the answers have been lost to translation over translation over translation. You know, all of his original teachings were in Aramaic, and those were then translated to Greek. Those were then translated to Latin. Those were then translated to French. Those were then translated to English. So all of the various translations have really diluted a lot of the understanding and the meaning, and I would love to go back, assuming that the man would speak English to me. I would love to go and have dinner with him and ask him what all this actually really means. Please lay it out in plain English so that we can start to really understand what God actually wants from us. And I have a lot of ideas and beliefs as to what that is. I think everybody does, usually informed by your own religious beliefs. Whether you are religious or if you are an atheist, you have your own belief system that is informed by your own life. We've all evolved over many, many years of our lives as to how we follow various teachings. Many follow teachings of one specific religion, many follow teachings of science. They're not necessarily mutually incompatible. And I would love to have that conversation to really square the circle and fully understand how we can have a comprehensive view of human consciousness
Yes.
that aligns with the greater good, and also making sure that we're being mindful of everything around us, because Jesus he was very peaceful, generally kind of guy is the general sense of him, but he did some violent stuff, like turning the money changers. He was kind of violent with the money changers in the temple. So clearly there is a point where he says that it's okay to be violent, and I'd so where's the line here, man?
Yeah.
At what point because love thy neighbor. Okay, what does that really mean? Because sometimes you yourself have been kind of violent to your neighbors. So clearly that gets there's been some murky translations here, and I would love to have a full comprehensive view of what all this actually means.
I agree completely. I think there's a lot that we are missing. If that certain books being removed, if that's being changed, as we know, the Council of Nicaea
Yep.
and other things, we are missing so much of what Jesus actually meant versus I think what's being taught. Um, I just think we are missing so much of how to connect to our source.
Right. And there's so many, there's 66 books of the Bible. There's more than that. It's just only 66 made it into the Bible.
Well, they
So,
just found the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1946.
right.
So it's like, what else are we not finding that's out there?
Yeah. So we really need to go back to the original source
Yeah,
and get
exactly.
a full download from the guy and write an updated book.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Steve, this is an amazing conversation. Love your mindset. Like I said, we could do this for the next 3 hours.
Oh, yeah, I
Um,
could.
and I love these topics. But that's all the questions I have for you, man. How can people find you? And what is one thing you want to leave people with?
There's a couple ways you can find me. If you go to earnscape.com, obviously that's my company. And if you reach out to us through any of the social media channels that you can find at the bottom of the website, someone will make your message eventually get to me. You can also reach out to me on Twitter, directly. I'm Steve Wood US is my handle. I may change it at some point. So if this is viewed in like a year or two, that might not work anymore. But as of right now, that's my handle. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can always just yeah. I would say that X is probably the best way to directly reach me because uh, I generally get bombarded on all sorts of other platforms. Nobody's really bombarding me on Twitter yet. God, I keep calling it Twitter, but nobody's really bombarding me on that platform yet. So most of the time, if you send me a message, it will get through. But if you come and offer some sort of paid collaboration or something, like I'm just going to ignore you.
Yeah.
If you ask me right away to follow you back, I'm not going to do it, and I'm just going to assume that you're just looking for followers. I'm going to ignore you. But if you have genuine questions, yeah, go ahead and drop me a line.
Awesome. Well, Steve, it was a great conversation, man. Like I said, loved really getting to, know you on a deeper level. So thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge with us, man.
I'm glad to
Thank
be
you.
here and glad to chat with
Yeah,
anybody who wants to listen.
yeah, for sure. Thanks, man.